Hey, it's Rachel. So let's talk about the books I've read recently. You can hear some birds chirping because my window's open, so just ignore that. Anyways, so I didn't do a wrap up for March because I only read 3 books, and I was like, I'll just do a double wrap up for March, April together. Are we crooked? I feel like we are. I don't know, something's going on here. If you're new here, be sure to subscribe. I do a lot of book content. I read 21 things over the course of March and April. Once again, 3 of which being in March. I have ordered my wrap up in a way. So we have some like little categories. Within those categories, I've gone best to worst, or best to most like to least like. I won't say worst because that's kind of rude. And just because I don't like something doesn't mean you won't like something. So I'll try and do them all justice. You know what I mean? Let's go ahead and get started. Our first category is books that I have not finished, that I started at some point a while ago and am finally getting around to, or finally got around to. These ones are ones that I've been meaning to finish, and I did a really good job this year, or this past month over April, getting those things done, because I was like, they've been sitting on my shelf, like back and forth from my actual TBR shelf to like off the shelf on my little like, I swear I'm gonna read this area. So I've really got a lot of those in. We have Foe by Ian Reid. I had started this back in December. As many of you would know, I was in a very extensive, very long reading slump, obviously. And so I had gotten maybe halfway through this book, or maybe like a third of the way through this book. And I was enjoying it. It's just I couldn't pay attention to reading. So I finally finished it, and I really liked it. Ian Reid wrote I'm Thinking of Ending Things and We Spread, which were both like 5-star reads for me, some of my favorites of the past couple years that I've read. And so I was like, I want to read Foe. And there's a movie that came out, I think on Amazon Prime. I might be wrong. Go ahead and correct me in the comments if I am wrong. Anyways, so Foe, we're following this man who he has been selected. He like lives in the middle of nowhere with his wife, and he has been selected or put into a lottery that he did not sign up for to go to Mars or like another planet or something. He's just a simple, normal dude. He just stacks grains at a grain mill or something like that. He's like, I did not sign up for this. I don't want to do this. I'm a totally normal person. And his wife's acting very strange. It is a weird book, but what more can you expect from Ian Reid, honestly? It has vibes of something's not quite right here. It's a little sci-fi, kind of has that horror tension to it. I enjoyed it. I gave it a 4-star. I didn't have a 5-star in this category, which is fine. It happens. Next up, we have Several People Are Typing by Calvin Kisuki. I had started this one as well. I think like must have been like November or December of last year. And then I kept picking it up and reading a little bit, but not getting anywhere. It takes place in a Slack forum. If you know that, it's like Microsoft Teams Slack sort of thing where companies use them to communicate amongst themselves in their different message boards, depending on what you're talking about. And you can directly message people. This one guy gets stuck inside of Slack. It's weird. It's very strange. The whole thing is told as a communication, like message forum sort of thing. And there's like, they don't actually show the emojis when emojis happen. It's just colon on each side, I think. Just the weirdest book that seems like it'd be super easy to read because it's very script-like, like that. But at the same time, it takes a while because there's so much going on inside of it. Okay, also the ending was kind of weird. I'm trying not to give smaller scores because I took so long to read these books, but instead look at it like how would I score it if I read it in one go instead of it being my fault because I had a reading slump. So I think the ending demoted it to a 4, not saying that I didn't like the ending completely, but there are just certain things about it. It was really funny too, if you want a funny book. This one actually made me laugh out loud. Weird. 4 stars. Okay, 5 years later, I finally finished Things Have Gotten Worse Since We Last Spoke and Other Misfortunes. This is 2 novellas and a short story. We have Things Have Gotten Worse Since We Last Spoke is one of the novellas, and then The Enchantment, and then, oh God, I can never remember. You'll Find It's Like That All Over. It's kind of a strange title for the short story. Eric LaRocca, I really enjoyed. You've Lost a Lot of Blood. I read that last year, 2 years ago, and fell completely in love. I started this one in June of last year. I was kind of making this little Eric LaRocca vlog. I was going to read a couple of his books, but I was just not reading much back then either. This was like a very long reading slump, a very long one. I finished Things Have Gotten Worse Since We Last Spoke last year in June, but I didn't finish The Enchantment or the other one. So I finally got around to finishing The Enchantment. Things Have Gotten Worse Since We Last Spoke. I really enjoyed. This is told through like email correspondence or message board correspondence, kind of emails as well. Emails off a message board, of a strange relationship that these 2 women end up creating that is very sub-dom and just like, I don't know the exact kink words behind it, but it is horror, definitely, but also kink and very queer, which we love. So The Enchantment, on the other hand, is going to be, well, it was, not is going to be. It took place, these 2 people, husband and wife, they were having a separation at this time. It had been discovered that the afterlife isn't real. A lot of people are having religious, questioning religion, that sort of thing. It gets really interesting really fast. There's a big jump, a big change that happens. You're questioning everything. There's one really annoying character that was making me laugh though, because it's just, they're so ridiculous. I read the whole thing to my boyfriend aloud and he enjoyed it too. And then the last short story is good. It's kind of about being a people pleaser, which I've been talking about a lot lately. I'm not a people pleaser. But about how our society has a lot of people pleasers. No offense. I gave it 4 stars. The last book I read that I had finished, finally, I started this one as well, like last summer, spring or summer. I was trying to do this vlog where, well, I'll just show you. It's before the coffee gets cold. I was trying to do this vlog where I read like a short story before I go to... I was trying to read cozy books to go to bed to help my sleep schedule. And that was a lot of work. I was like, I'm going to do 30 days of this. It's a lot of work. Also, it probably wasn't a good idea. I started with this one before the coffee gets cold. I know a lot of people really love this book. They're like, it's cozy, it's sweet. It's this coffee shop in Japan where if you sit in this specific seat with all these different rules, you can travel in time. I didn't love it. I think it's the translation. I think it was kind of maybe just the story in general. Maybe I'm not really into the cozy atmosphere. It was boring to me. It was dull. It did not hold my fascination. I did not get emotional about any of these things. Everyone was like, I cried so much. I was not crying. I was not getting emotional. And that's just me. Maybe that's me. I am an emotional person. I do cry over books, but not this one. It fell flat for me. Kind of boring. It has 4 sections in it. Short stories kind of that revolve around the same thing. And I don't know. I gave it 2 stars because I was like, I didn't like it. I just didn't. Flat out, I didn't like it. That's it. And that's okay. That's okay. Next up, we're going to be talking about my book club reads we have our first one, which is Papo, Leonie Ross. This is a weird one. I knew it was magical realism. I knew it was going to be kind of strange, but I just didn't realize what it was. It was a lot weirder than I thought, which I like a weird book. But there's one point where things are falling out of them that shouldn't be, and I was like, that's a weird little side thing, and it wasn't. Anyways, so this one takes place on this island. Leonie Ross is Jamaican, and it's very inspired by Jamaica, and just, it says inflected with rhythms and textures, inspired by where she's from, Jamaica. It was beautiful. There were beautiful elements in this book. I just don't think there was much of a plot there. There were certain characters that I enjoyed, but it followed so many characters and so many stories. And it's like, I see the point of it, but at the same time, I just don't think I completely connected with everything that was happening, and connected with pieces, but not everything. And I didn't see the point in a lot of things happening and what we were trying to get at here. So I end up giving it 3 stars, and that is basically my thoughts on Papo. There's like a magic system where everyone has a magic talent. I should probably tell you that too, which was interesting. It's very interesting. There's some strange talents that people have, whether it be that they can sense when someone's going to die, or like the age they're going to die, or it's that they can make something flavored without having any flavorings, any spices or herbs. That was interesting, but I don't know. Okay. The next one, I don't actually have the book because I've been trying not to buy as many books for when I do have book club. The Papo one I had bought prior and was my book, and I chose it for book club. But this other one, The Bone People by Carrie Hume. So we follow our main character. So my camera died, and then I also started shooting this again and got very far in. Well, my camera didn't die. Anyways, so I got pretty far in, and then I realized I wasn't holding my microphone. Yes. So I was like, I have to redo this again. Anyways, we're back again. The Bone People. We have a nonverbal boy. He was shipwrecked. He's probably 9 years old. He was shipwrecked when he was like 2 or 3. And he's probably 9 years old now. He's been adopted by this man, a Maori man, and there's this woman living kind of hermit-like. It's set in the 80s. It's written in the 80s too. And she ends up with this boy at her doorstep. She can't kind of get him back to anyone because it's late at night and there's a storm coming through. So she ends up communicating with him. He communicates through hand gestures, kind of like sign language, but I don't think it's a formal sign language that he is using. Then the main issue I have with this book is there is child abuse in it, but not just that there's child abuse in it, because there are books with child abuse that we learn something or something like that. Anyways, the way it is framed is just horrible. It is horrible. It's almost like pro-child abuse. It's very strange. It's like, well, you can abuse your child a little bit. No, you can't. Do not do that. Oh, yeah, it's fine. Whatever. I can stalk you a little bit too. What? What is happening here? Anyways, let me know. If you've read this book, please tell me what your thoughts are on it, because I was appalled. It was not a horror book, but it felt like one because I was horrified. So anyways, I gave it no stars because I didn't even know what to do with this. I was like, I should give it 1 star. Yeah, maybe I should. I was just, yeah. Anyways, next up, we have the books that I read for that vlog that I just posted, but at the same time, It's just the rest of the books I read. It's not really the category. It's just these are the rest of the books. And then I have graphic novels. So I have 3 more books and then just graphic novels. So we have The Deep by River Solomon. This was originally written as a part of this clipping telephone game was happening between all these artists, and River Solomon wrote this book off of it, which I think is very beautiful. And it is the story of, it's like the reframing of history, where we have slave ships where the slave traders would throw slaves that were pregnant women overboard, and were reframing it as, what if the babies born became almost like mermaids, but not quite mermaids. I don't think they're exactly mermaids. Anyways, there's some magic here. It's underwater. It's magical. And we have our main person, Yetu. And Yetu is the historian. One person holds all of the history. And once a year, they come and bring that history to everyone and kind of like instill it into them. Everyone remembers and celebrates. And at the same time, Yetu's struggling with holding all the memories, all of this tragedy, horrifying things that have happened, the grief, the sadness, everything. She has to experience it. So I think it's a lot to do with generational trauma, but as well, it has to do with being sure to remember our past and not forget it and not just set it aside. Or like just be like, well, I celebrate it once a year, or think about it once a year, so that should be fine. Anywho, it is a beautiful book. I would very much so recommend anyone to read it. It had been sitting on my shelf forever, and I kept meaning to, and I'm so glad I did. 5 stars. Next, we have The Final Girls Support Group. This is by Grady Hendrix. I've always loved Grady Hendrix. This is a horror book. It follows a group of different final girls. That is the last girl in the horror movie that's still alive. This is years later for most of them. Most of them have had their sequels, like the killers come back, or it's the killer's mothers come for them, or something like that, or a groupie. But now it's like all the final girls are dealing with stuff, and it all just happens real fast, and they're in this support group together. It just like the action just begins. It just starts, and you're like, whoa, you're thrown into hyperdrive within like 20 pages. And I loved it so much. I would definitely recommend it. I think there are some things that I didn't love so much, like the ending. It was like, okay, come on now. So I didn't give it 5 stars, but I did give it 4, and that's pretty good. So glad I read it. Last but not least, Yellowface. I finally read Yellowface by R.F. Kuang. This one, same author as Babel, obviously very, very different. This one it follows June, and June is an author who is not doing so well, but June's frenemy, Athena, is doing great. Anyways, Athena dies. June happens to be there. Athena steals her manuscript, and I believe Athena is Chinese, and June decides that she's going to start going by the name June. That's her middle name, so that she sounds more like a minority, most likely Asian, Chinese. It is so horrible. Athena, R.I.P. Athena. I'm sorry. You were loved. I wish you the best. Those are my thoughts. Anyways, I gave it 4 stars. I did really enjoy it. I enjoyed a lot about it, but the ending was kind of not really the best. I think it became kind of like a thriller, like too much of a thriller. But it did remind me of that book, The Plot. So if you like The Plot, or if you like this, read The Plot. If you like The Plot, read this. That's how I feel. Ownership. Yeah. Next up, we have our graphic novels, which I have written down because I knew for a fact I would forget all of them. I read so many. These are, once again, in order of how much I enjoyed them. So we have Sabrina by Nick Dranaso. This one is about this girl, Sabrina. She goes missing, but we're really following not really following Sabrina's boyfriend, kind of, but we're also following Sabrina's boyfriend's friend who's in the military. We're following him as he lets Sabrina's boyfriend come live with him. They kind of bond. There's a lot of like trauma going on. It's very dark, it's dismal, it's depressing, it's beautifully drawn. It kind of reminds me of poorly drawn lines, like the backgrounds at least. I don't know, there's kind of like a vibe to it happening. Maybe it's the colors as well. The color palette is just, or the color story, as we say, beautiful, beautiful. I would recommend it, especially if you're like, oh my God, it's about like, what if you went down a conspiracy theory hell, you know what I mean? Next up, we have Boundless by Jillian Tamaki. This is like short stories in graphic novel form, and I've always loved Jillian Tamaki and her sister, but this one's just Jillian, and we have all different weird short stories happening. We have like this woman who, there's two Facebooks. There's like a alternate universe Facebook that you can follow yourself on and see what they're up to, and it's kind of difficult to watch because you're like, oh, you know, like, oh, what if I was happy? Oh, I don't know, there's just all sorts of weird things in this one. There's a woman who keeps getting smaller and smaller and smaller. Strange. Well, that was 5 stars. Anyways, next up we have Ducks 2 Years in the Oil Sands by Kate Beaton. I've never read Hark of Vagrant or any other Kate Beaton, so this was a first for me, but this is nonfiction, a memoir about her life in the oil sands in Canada, her working for oil companies up there to make money to cover her student loans because she got a bachelor's degree in art. It was a lot, pretty trauma, but also it was really beautifully told and done, and I feel like I learned a lot. At the same time, I just enjoyed the story in general. Not really enjoyed, but I felt like she presented it in a way that I was almost inside of the story itself, inside of her life for those 2 years and the struggle she had with working for basically the devil, but also working around basically devils, because those men there, oh my God, because they're living there all the time and sometimes going home. Most of them are married, go home to see their wives, or maybe they're not, but there not many women there, so you can imagine how all the men start acting. This is back in like 2005, 2006, 2005 through 2008. No, 2006 through something like that. So next we have Here by Richard McGuire. This takes place in one place in time. It's in a living room for most of it. So it's inside of a house, but then it also goes back a million billion years ago. You always see it as if the camera is set up in one spot and you're just looking at it right there. It's not really like a narrative story. It's more like an experience of things that have happened right here. There's no follow through line, but it's a piece of art, a beauty. It was funny. I was reading it and my boyfriend was like, I described it to him, and my boyfriend's like, oh, we were in the dark. He was going to sleep. He was like, why do you keep flipping pages? Like, what's happening? What type of graphic novel are you reading? You're flipping back and forth and back and forth. And I explained it and he went, oh, that was originally published in 1980 something, part of it, or at least the beginning of it. This one thing, he's like, yeah, I read it, blah, blah, blah. But this is the more recent one, so like 2015 or so. Very interesting. Next up, Heartstopper Volume 5, Alice Oseman. We're almost at the end of Heartstopper. This is 2 boys fall in love in England, and that's really all you need to know. It's friggin' adorable. There's a show on Netflix that's also friggin' adorable, and you should read it or watch it. It's also kind of sad, you know. We're dealing with a lot of things. So next up we have Patience by Daniel Klaus. This is the same person who wrote Ghost World. This is, I think, a little more recent. I don't know. So Patience feels a lot like Transmetropolitan. We once again have a woman that has, well, she hasn't gone missing. She was murdered. And her husband, they were about to have a baby. She's murdered. Her husband is like, oh my God. And he's left alone and like, oh my God, my wife died. She was pregnant. Oh my God. It's like 20 years later, he ends up being able to go back in time to try and stop it. And it is super weird, futuristic strangeness that if you like that, you should read it. I gave it 4 stars because I liked it. Next up is Bottom Feeders. That's BTTMFDRS. I didn't realize that's what that meant. But someone was like, oh, Rachel, that's Bottom Feeders. And I was like, oh, so that's Ezra Clayton Daniels. This girl moves into this apartment building in kind of a bad neighborhood, and she is a fashion person. She makes fashion. She makes clothes. I don't know. My brain no work. There's just like weird things going on in this apartment. There's something alive in there, and there's some scary stuff happening, and you find out as you go. It gave it 4 stars. The color story on this one too, beautiful, beautiful. I love it. Next is Home After Dark by David Small. This is the same person who did Stitches. This is a fiction, not like Stitches, which was a memoir, so, I think. I'm pretty sure. Anyways, Home After Dark, which is not to be confused with Riley Sager's Home Before Dark, because my brain keeps doing that. It follows this boy who... his mother is left. He's with his father. His father's like, we need to find somewhere to go. They end up moving to California to stay with his aunt. His aunt's like, you can't stay here. And his dad's like, I need to find a job. This is like in the 60s or so. And he ends up finding a job up Northern California or Oregon. His dad sucks. That's that on that, and it's just a boy living his life and figuring stuff out and trying to whatever. It was good. It was okay. It's not as good as Stitches. I gave it 3 stars. I was just kind of like, meh. Next is Mage and the Endless Unknown by S.J. Miller. This one is basically wordless. There's like a couple of words in it. And it's this mage that's on a quest, and there's not much going on. It's really pretty. I gave it 3 stars because I was like, it was a nice little experience. Will I sit with it and remember it forever? No, definitely not. Next is In Utero by Chris Gooch. Yes, that is the name. There's been a bomb that went off at some point. This is in the near future. This young girl, her parents are pretty cheap, and they're like, we're going to put you in daycare or summer camp daycare sort of thing at this one place, and it's in this abandoned mall, and they find weird little alien thingies and call the government, and everything goes real strange, and this girl has some strange experiences. It felt like a piece of a story, but not a full story, though. It was really well done in the sense that it was beautiful. It had an interesting premise, but I just don't think it's a one shot, I think there's more to it, and there should be more to it. Next, we have A Guest in the House by Emily Carroll. What even happens? So we're following this woman who has married this man who his prior wife has died, and he has a child. And so she's a stepmom now. She's a little younger than this guy. He's like a dentist. They move to this lake, or she already lives there. I don't friggin' know. It was a little confusing. The ending was just not very good. Just the whole thing was just not. It was okay. It was okay. It was interesting. I was intrigued. I thought it had some very cool panels and very cool stuff happening, but it was confusing. It was just confusing. I gave it 3 stars. Last but not least is Daughters of Snow and Cinder by Nuria Tamarit. God. This one is written by a Spanish author from Spain, but it takes place in America, and it has to do with the gold rush. It's this girl who has gone through a lot of stuff, and she is trying to go west to find gold, and she ends up getting kind of screwed out of it, but she's like tracking the trackers, and there are a lot. it's a little weird. There are 3 people in this book with missing left eyes. But that's not really explained why they're all missing left eyes. I mean, it's kind of, but I'm like, why the left eye? Why everyone? It's their right eye. It's left on the page, but this is right. Anyways, kind of weird. Kind of weird. A lot of missing eyeballs. The same eyeball over and over again. Also, there's a giant wolf spirit thing. There's a big fight. I don't know. It wasn't great. I think the translation was not the best too. So that probably didn't help. I gave it 2 stars because I wasn't there for it. Anyways, that's the end of the books I have read recently. I feel like that was very long. Whoopsies. So hopefully you enjoy. Let me know your thoughts if you've read any of these or if you have anything you want me to read. Because I might read it. I'm like not looking at the camera. Good job me. Okay. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being my friend. Be sure to subscribe if you're not already. Love you.